Workday afternoon on Money FM 89.3.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3. I'm Rachel Kelly, and we've got a very special panel discussion coming up live right now. LogiSYM Digital 2020. Now, they've had a whole session going on today, and throughout LogiSYM Digital's 2020 discussion today, esteemed panelists and speakers have shared what supply chain security in the post-COVID-19 world could look like, internal and external collaboration across supply chain networks, and long and short-term post-COVID-19 scenarios for healthcare. And like all industries, the supply chain sector has been shaken by the biggest crisis to hit the globe in recent history. And while none of us have a crystal ball, we'll now discuss where the industry is headed and what it could look like going forward. First, I'd like to introduce who we have with us as part of our panel today. We've got Stephanie Krishnan, who's the Research Director for Manufacturing Insights at IDC Asia Pacific. We also have Joe Lombardo, Director Project and Performance Management at ESP Consult. Richard Ryan, who's the Industry Strategist at Blue Yonder APAC. Prashant Dadlani, who's the founder and CEO at Blue, and of course, Dr. Raymond Krishnan, President of the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society. Thank you all for being with us live on Money FM 89.3.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Hi.
So let's get started. And before we take a look at all of your crystal balls, let's take a look at where we are in the industry at the moment. You know, safe distancing and working from home has become the norm. How have these measures impacted the supply chain industry?
Joe, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Lombardo. Clearly, there's been a big disruption when COVID hit us. Very quickly, there was a gradual realization that we had to find a way to adapt. And now we are in the third phase of stabilization and finding a new norm, a new visioning of how to work with the constraints we are in. So there's very challenging times ahead of us, and we can discuss that further as we go along in the discussion.
I think there's the big surprise was the fact that working from home actually works very well in some cases. We were able to run full projects what 6 months ago would be impossible to do remotely. We were able to successfully do that. So I think one of the things is that going forward, I think this will not go back to working 100% from the office. I think a lot of work will continue to be done remotely and by home. The other complex is having PPE in every single site. If you have hundreds of warehouses or hundreds of thousands of workers, having masks, gel at every single site is not a simple task. Also, it's a realization that this may be going on for way over the end of this year. We may be using masks up to the middle of next year. And social distancing, when you have, in some cases, customers have 1,000, 2,000 workers at the warehouse, trying to plan the work with social distancing is a very, very complex, and they're now facing that reality at this moment.
On the back of that, you know, and I want to ask this to Stephanie, what are some of the innovations that we've seen within the supply chain industry as a result of what's happened with COVID-19?
Well, some of the very basic ones have been around things like, you know, dealing with the potential for contact tracing and the likes of this. We've seen 3D printing come to the fore, where organizations are actually using 3D printing to help design, you know, handle holders and pullers and ways to physically get around facilities without actually touching it. Other areas of innovation that we're seeing is actually in the collaborative space. So where organizations are starting to collaborate online in terms of product development, looking up into their supply chains, being able to draw on the inventory capabilities of their suppliers to look at new products that might support some of the PPE efforts that Richard was talking about.
Prashant, what has this meant for some of the projects that you've been working on at Blue?
So for us, we've seen a lot of rage in the contactless delivery space, and as a result, retailers having to find different means of kind of getting goods to consumers' hands. And ourselves as an operator of parcel lockers that we call Blueport, we've seen a real surge in users wanting to not only collect parcels from such parcel lockers, but being able to ship out as well. And a lot of C2C shipments, carousel users and the like, wanting to use this kind of medium instead of physically meeting up, to get goods across and exchange hands.
Richard, just quickly, because Blue Yonder helps businesses modernize their supply chains from my very basic understanding. Maybe you can tell us, to what extent do you think COVID-19 has accelerated this move into RPA and AI?
We see a very fast move into robots. Robots being easy to deploy and not requiring special infrastructure like very fancy automation. So we are, at this moment, we just launched an initiative with Microsoft to integrate robots much faster. So this is coming everywhere in the world, India, Singapore, everywhere. AI and ML will be a harder, and it will take longer time. I think it will catch up, but it will take longer. I think we see robots as coming the first wave, and AI ML will come very fast, but following this wave.
And just for our listeners here on Money FM 89.3, they may not be so familiar with some of the technological advancements when it comes to robotics for supply chain. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on how this technology is advancing within the industry.
If you see,
and how it's implemented.
Yeah, if you see a person working in a warehouse, traditionally a picker going to pick something in a warehouse, he has to pick that and come back to the start of the warehouse. They now have robots that will follow him with a little basket. He puts the goods in the basket. The robot takes it back when the basket is full. The picker can continue to work. So you can have much more efficiency, which means less people in the warehouse. So when you need to do social distance, the only way of doing that is increasing efficiency. So using these robots is a very easy way to increase the efficiency.
And Joe, what about you? From your perspective, how do you see things evolving within the RBA arena for supply chain as a result of COVID-19?
I think there's no reversing. It's going to go forward continuously. It's a question of changing the mindsets and getting people to accept that there actually are many more benefits than negatives. People, with robots, you can accept it because you can see it. With AI, you can't see it, so it creates more of a fear. But breaking down the barriers of getting people to understand technology and how it helps them to improve their work performance and output, I think is going to be a big advantage. But you've got to get the buy-in. You've got to get people to change their mindset, understand that it's not a mysterious journey. It's a real life journey which you can't reverse. So you've got to accept it and go along with it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? When we talk about robots and artificial intelligence, for a lot of our listeners, this concept may be something that they would think of, relate more to, a science fiction movie. But, Joe, gazing into your crystal ball, how do you see this evolving? I mean, you've said there's no going back. So what's next for this particular area for supply chain? How are these robots going to evolve? How is artificial intelligence going to take the next step for supply chains going forward as a result of what we've seen with COVID-19?
Well, clearly, the COVID-19 has been a major disruptor. So the disruption creates new paradigms. And we've seen already the paradigm acceleration in adopting technology. The paradigm has also affected the people engagement, the people working in the various environments. And therefore, robots are going to be also accelerating their presence within our work environment. So again, it's a question of training, it's a question of engaging, it's a question of collaboration, it's a question of aligning the current skills that we've got to what the new skills need to be with robots, with technology, with more high techs of understanding. So it's a very exciting period, really, really exciting. It's up to leaders to make this transition work for all the workforce.
Now, Stephanie, in a recent post, you shared that factories and facilities have been closed due to quarantine and lockdown requirements. and those that have remote and automation capabilities are coming out on top. So on the back of what Joe has just said, for those that haven't started their digital transformation journey yet and are wondering, how do I navigate this? Where do I begin? What would you advise them?
Well, the first place to look at is the place where you're experiencing the greatest pain. You need to look at how you're going to put in technologies that deal with that particular pain. So whether it's you have transportation nightmares, you are running short of raw materials, you don't have visibility across your supply chain. These are areas that you will be experiencing specific problems. So you need to apply the 80-20 rule. The one that's causing you the greatest problem is the one that you focus on first. But at the same time, you need to think it long term. And a lot of organizations that we're talking to at IDC are actually saying that I'm looking now to how I can innovate in the future, realizing that this technology is going to come into play. So they need to put a roadmap in, something that they can do for the short, mid, and long term in order to adjust to the changes that are coming.
Now, talking about adjusting to changes, and we've spoken a lot about technology, and Joe mentioned this briefly, but obviously what's happening at the moment has had a profound impact on people within the supply chain. Prashant, I can see you nodding your head. Perhaps you can share with us, as firms look to streamline processes and implement more digitized strategies, and with everything that's happening with COVID-19, what impact will this have on people within the supply chain industry?
So I think with anyone's digitalization strategy, there's kind of two broad components to it. I think earlier we talked about automation, the use of robotics and other like technologies to make processes more efficient. But there's another component that we call integration as well. And that's really about having that data visibility and making sure that data within the organization and data outside the organization is accessible, is usable, and allows the humans, the users, to really make those business decisions or those informed decisions. And increasingly, as we work remotely from home, having access to these data is critical in order to allow projects and business processes and business flows to run smoothly. So I think for people, it's really about making sure that we're equipped with access, with data, with the tools to be able to manage that data and make those decisions. Otherwise, projects don't go so smoothly.
Brian, what are your thoughts? I can see you nodding your head as well here for this particular sector. What are your thoughts in terms of, Richard, how this is impacting people within the supply chain industry?
I was just going to say a little bit more, confirming what Stephanie Prasad said. Principally for smaller and medium companies, find out the main pain. Don't try to solve all your pains at once. We see sometimes companies wanting to solve everything at once, and it's impossible. Even for large corporations, it's impossible. So build a roadmap, but tackle every main problem at a time, and you will see results, and you can build on top of these results.
I think it's also important to remember that it's technology with people.
That is correct.
Right? It's not technology instead of people. I think one of the assumptions when we hear the words robotics and AI and this sort of thing is that we're getting rid of the workers. What this does is actually helps workers do a better job. All right? When we're looking at situations like social distancing in warehouses and factory facilities, it's a way to put distance between workers so that they're safer. But we still need the workers to do the actual fiddly work that requires greater capabilities than robots are available. Similarly, when we apply software, robots, and AI, it's to support the decisions that workers can actually make. So it's technology with people, not technology instead of.
That's a fantastic point. You're listening to Money FM 89.3, and we are broadcasting LogiSYM Digital 2020. And we have with us on a panel Stephanie Krishnan, who's the Research Director, Manufacturing Insights at IDC Asia Pacific, Joe Lombardo, the Director, Project and Performance Management at ESP Consult, Richard Ryan, who's the Industry Specialist at Blue Yonder APAC, and Prashant Dadlani, founder and CEO at Blue, along with Dr. Raymond Krishnan, who's the president of Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society. Now, moving on to the next topic, and this is something that's quite near and dear to many of us here at Money FM, and that is sustainability. And a big trend that we've seen happening across the globe, with governments rolling out multiple stimulus packages. Particularly in Europe, we've seen a call for these packages not to be tied specifically to COVID-19, but to perhaps have longer legs and to be linked with sustainability. To what extent do you see COVID-19 and sustainability tying together to impact the supply chain industry, whether or not that's within supply chain finance or people looking at longer term sustainability performance for companies within the supply chain sector?
I'll take that one. In terms of sustainability, I mean, in IDC, we did a survey, just came out during COVID-19, and we actually asked manufacturers in the industry about their supply chains and where they saw the greatest area of risk mitigation. Now, the first two areas that they responded to are quite straightforward, I think, for supply chain professionals. It's about supply chain visibility and getting raw materials and finished goods sourcing. But what was interesting is the number 3 point. And the number 3 point is that they're focusing on sustainability as an area of risk mitigation. Now, when we drilled down further and we looked in ASEAN, which is the 10 nations, this rose to number 1. So it's not just, I think, governments that are tying policies, and they are looking to tie incentives and grants and other ways to take the supply chain and manufacturing and other industrial industries forward. But the manufacturing industry and the supply chain industry itself is actually looking at supply chain as a place of risk mitigation. Right? So what this means is they're looking at electronic transport, reducing emissions, because of all of this not only saves the earth, but it also saves money. It just makes
what are your thoughts there, Joe?
Well, I think very clearly organizations are going to be managed differently. The mitigation for sustainability is all about people. People's behavior, people's decisions, the way you manage your resources and your technology. So organizations are going to have to be managed very differently the way they are now. And technology, the integration of the supply chain tools that Richard was talking about and other people are talking about will help integrate the horizontals versus having a silo type of organization. Leadership is going to be changing. Leadership is going to be looking at a more complete picture rather than look at it in different segments, looking at one part of the organization. But end of the day, it comes down to people, people's behavior, people's choices, the way you manage the talent and the way you manage the skills in executing all of these challenges around us. So it's a very, as I said, it's a very comprehensive way to look at sustainability with technology as one of the lead drivers in there.
Richard, how does that change the way that you're working with companies when it comes to helping businesses modernize their supply chains? How does sustainability fit in with that?
Well,
is that an element?
Absolutely. I think for years, we helped companies save every dollar, every cent on supply chain. The result of that is extremely complex supply chains, products crossing the world because of 1 or 2 cents cheaper to manufacture in country A or country B. I think catching what Stephanie said, when you try to build more resilience, you're going to have to rethink your supply chain. And sustainability is one of the elements. The cheapest place to produce may not be the place companies choose for a lot of other reasons. So they have to now take in consideration sustainability, geopolitical problems, ports. We've seen countries where the ports closed during COVID. We've seen others where it didn't. So a lot of these other factors will play as companies redesign their supply chain. And I think, like Joe said, this is no way back. Companies will have to redesign their supply chain, and the ones that do it well will be the successful ones. And I think sustainability is one of the main topics that they'll be taking in consideration.
Yeah.
And Prashant, what about you? Because Blue, you will also work with businesses for retail, logistics solutions, and a number of other sectors. So how does sustainability for supply chains tie in? Is that a big theme for you looking into the future of supply chain?
I think it definitely is. I think what the other panelists already mentioned, it's not just for a green measure or green effort, but really it makes business sense as well, building the resilience, optimizing your resources, perhaps even building better consumer experiences as a result of attaining those sustainable outcomes. So it's really a more holistic view and seeing how can businesses keep all that in mind, be resource efficient, and as a result, agile, flexible, and nimble in being able to react to all these different external factors and shocks. Especially when you're a retailer and you're dealing with consumers. Consumers can be fickle, can be picky. You want to make sure that your brand experience, your customer experience is able to withstand all these external factors and be able to communicate to your retailers, to your consumers rather, what actions you're taking to make sure you're more sustainable. I think consumers increasingly look at that as well, and brands are taking note.
How are you? Sorry.
If I can make one comment, Rachel, I think one of the biggest challenges everyone's facing is letting go of the past, letting go of the baggage they're carrying to make way for the new solutions. And making way for the new solutions is automatically bringing resilience and robustness in your systems, in your technology solutions, your business continuity, and also in able to move forward. But if you don't let go of the old baggage, you can't move forward.
As you say, Joe, they say old roots run deep, and often it's very difficult to dig those up and plant some new shoots.
Unfortunately, that's very true.
So I'm mindful that we've got 10 minutes left on the clock. Perhaps, Raymond, you can share. Do we have any questions that we want to throw to the panel from our chat? I can see we've got 56 messages that have popped up.
Yes, we do. They're coming in hard and fast. I'll start with the first question, Rachel. With the current pandemic, is that helping to speed up the use of collaborative robots and integrating this with artificial intelligence and also the impending 5G implementation? Is COVID-19 and the pandemic helping to speed this up?
I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier. Maybe we touched on this, but and I know Richard shared a little bit more on this. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate as well?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. COVID, they're not coming up because of COVID. COVID is speeding the process. Yeah. And as a result, also the fact that change is inevitable. So once you have to change, you better change everything at once. Where in the past, people were holding to the change, as Joe mentioned. I think now that they have to change, they will consider all the new technologies and they will leapfrog and use ML, 5G, whatever is available. It will impact a lot.
All right, thanks a lot, Richard. We've got a question from Sanjay. Sanjay, you're live.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Ray. Good afternoon, Ms. Kelly, and congrats to everybody for being live. I'm so excited. My question is about technology, and this is not about creating jobs or replacing jobs. It's about replacing current jobs with new ones. With all the buzz that the pandemic has created about supply chain, are we going to see that the new young candidates now take up supply chain as a first choice as a career instead of going to engineering and some other job? And will the academic institutions also will start providing more supply chain graduates in future? That's my question. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Stephanie, perhaps would you like to share a little bit more about what you see from a macro perspective for the supply chain industry in terms of manpower?
Well, I could, yeah, from a macro and from a micro, because I know that one of the reasons that supply chain graduates don't choose our industry is because we're not sexy enough, right? We have typically rooted ourselves in spreadsheets and physical aspects. There are these fantastic tools out there that are provided by the likes of Yonder and their competitors. But in terms of when they hit industry, when graduates hit industry, they're actually experiencing like it's back to the future, or in this case, future to the back. I mean, you go back to a land of spreadsheets when they've learned about these fantastic tools out of university. I think this is going to make supply chains and manufacturers and retailers and all the partners in supply chains actually start using these tools. And these tools have been around for years. Students have been learning on it, and now they're actually going to be able to do their job and practice with it. And I think that's exciting. We're actually going to get the talent that we've been after for years. And it's going to I think it'll break the back of this talent crunch that we've been experiencing.
Yeah. And with everything we've been talking about with AI and robotics, it sounds exciting. I'm sure our listeners would want to find out more after this as well. Joe, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a big gap in understanding. First of all, people sometimes confuse supply chain with logistics, and logistics is about transportation, warehousing, and as Stephanie said, maybe the unsexy type of activities. But supply chain is much more complex. It talks about demand planning, it talks about inventory management, it talks about IT tools, it talks about very sophisticated and complex algorithms. So it's becoming an extremely high-skilled function. I think here we need to close the gap between what academia is teaching and what is expected or accepted in the industry. And it's true what Steph just said also, is young people come out into industry and see manual systems running on Excel sheets, a very old-fashioned way of thinking, and their level of technology readiness and what they find in the marketplace is a big shock, and they run away from it. So there's a lot of work to be done between industry and academia to close this gap.
Joe, what do you think then is needed for this gap to be closed?
I think there needs to be an education process, not only at the student level or the candidate level, but also at the management level. The entrepreneurs who've been in business for 20, 30, 40 years have to realize that the world has changed, and the young people coming out here are expecting a different work experience and a different work environment, and they need to be a major player in this change. And it won't happen by itself. It needs to really engage the older, more mature industry entrepreneurs to make this move. And
is this a global issue for supply chain when it comes to manpower, or is this something that perhaps varies region by region?
I think it's a global phenomenon. Some regions, Asia tends to be a little bit more advanced because of the younger population, a bit more dynamic. The can type of philosophy also in Asia, that nothing's too much. Europe tends to be a little more conservative. The US has their own way of thinking. So it's a general world problem, but it needs to be addressed all over the place, and especially as supply chain is a global tool, is a global facilitation that has to interface across all cultures and all systems.
And if I could just add a comment there, if you think about the way that you would have set up a company 20 years ago, and then you had the chance to set up the same company today, you would do it in vastly different ways. Exactly. And so as a result, you have a lot of companies that are being disrupted by new incumbents that are embracing that technology because they haven't kept up with the rate of change. And we actually found out in one of our surveys that close to 80% of organizations actually expect to be disrupted in the next 12 months, and most of those by new incumbents.
Absolutely.
And is that one of the challenges of the industry then, in terms of manpower? It's keeping up with the changes that are happening, and not just bringing on, a fresh young workforce, but, upskilling and training the current workforce, especially with everything that's happening at the moment, making sure that that the talent that you have on board is ready to take that next leap forward in terms of embracing new technologies. I know Joe mentioned but old roots run deep, and that's not just when it comes to technology, but when it comes to manpower as well. What are some of the challenges in terms of upskilling? I think that was a very long way to get around to that question. Upskilling the current workforce to make sure that they're ready to take things on, grab the bull by the horns as soon as we come out of COVID-19.
I think if companies want to be resilient and flexible, which is what COVID has shown, the companies that are flexible, resilient, can change fast, they are the ones that are performing better in COVID. They also need trained workforce. That means they're going to have to train their workforce and keep training constantly, making sure that they are up to date and they can do multiple jobs. If you don't train your workforce, you cannot expect them to do multiple jobs just out of the box. So I think training at every single level, as Joe mentioned, from executives down to the persons on the floor, they have to train and they have to be ready to do multiple tasks.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 2.5 minutes left on the clock. Raymond, are there any burning questions that we have coming in from the audience?
Yes, we have one, and it's about how to train our youngsters as they enter the marketplace. How are we going to train them? We talk about making supply chain sexy, but how do we train them? What sort of courses or training should we give them?
And Joe, I know you spoke a little bit about that just now. Perhaps you'd like to take this one up first.
Yeah. I think that's a very burning question, because in fact, do we really want to train the new people coming to the market in the old habits, or do we want to train the new habits in the old market? And that is the dichotomy that we are faced with today. So we should not keep thinking about training the young people coming out, because that may demotivate them completely and put us in reverse gear.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Well, we do have actually some trends that are coming up, and those that are leading in their recovery are actually already investing in online learning, running short courses. So short courses are becoming a big tool, and I know with the Singapore government fund for training, there's a lot of short courses available through the likes of Udemy and other platforms. Put training allowances out there for people to use them. I mean, you know, that can address young and old. And if you need digital skills, then have the young people foster the older people in making that happen. We've seen a lot of success with people collaborating, you know, between generations, intergenerational collaboration on projects.
Right.
Well, I'd like to just say, you know, we're hitting the 4 o'clock mark, and this discussion, I mean, it's been half an hour long, and I was thinking, oh gosh, you know, is this too long a period of time to be talking about this? But we don't have enough time to touch all these important topics that we want to talk about today. So I'd like to thank everyone very much. Once again, you're listening to Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station, and we have been broadcasting live LogiSYM Digital 2020, and we've had with us Stephanie Krishnan, Research Director, Manufacturing Insights at IDC Asia Pacific, Joe Lombardo, Director, Project and Performance Management at ESP Consult, Richard Ryan, Industry Strategist at Blue Yonder APAC, Prashant Dadlani, who's the founder and CEO at Blue, and Dr. Raymond Krishnan, the President of the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society. So thank you all very much for joining us. It's been an extremely enjoyable and insightful session.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.